because all is accessible at the same time. Like in quantum physics, they'll say that every possibility is happening at the same time. So that means me as a millionaire and me as a homeless person or me as the janitor is all happening at the same time. It really just depends on what vibrational tendency we are tuned into. And that happens based on how we're meeting the world and moving beyond our wounds and our limitations to really call in our creator, our manifestor. So that is the spiral path. The second rite of passage is diving into family of origin. So what this means is that in order for us to truly grow, for true maturity, to come into greater wholeness, we must be willing to dive into our history, what happened in our family, because we don't recognize it, but between the ages of conception and 8 years old, but mostly between 4 and 7, our mind is in a theta state, which means that everything that's happening around us, we are absorbing as like sponges. And so when we are watching the world, things might happen, negative messaging might happen, negative imaging might happen. And when these things happen to a child in theta state, what ends up happening is they take that on as a reference point, and that reference point is then held. So anytime something happens and it triggers us, we bypass, we go back to our childhood experience, and we end up meeting the world and the experience that is happening to us in this moment, whether it be with our beloved, with our brother or whatnot. But emotionally, we are responding from the regression to our childhood state and the way we learned how to deal with that situation. So for example, for me as a child, my father used to raise his voice when he wasn't being understood or people weren't respecting him. So I saw that, I took that as the reference point to say that when people are not respecting me or they don't understand or they're fucking up, it's very important for me to raise my voice because that will declare my dominance and it will call people's attention. So although that might have a possibility of working in the small term, if in my personal life, it has been the detrimental force that has kept me stuck, misunderstood, and in separation from everybody that I want to be connected to in those moments. So it's very important to recognize that the stories of our childhood are not left in our childhood. We carry them with us in the recesses of our experience, and we carry that and we respond to the stimuli, and we are not coming from the awakened masculine or the awakened feminine. We are actually coming from the wounded child that only picked up what it learned based on the reference points. So it's, you know, we like to say that, you know, family of origin is the gift that keeps on giving. You can't do enough family of origin work because there's so much content, whether it be with the primary caregivers, the lack of the primary caregivers, the siblings. So they say that regardless whether the statement was happening to you or whether you saw it between your parents or your siblings, you still got that reference point. So if you saw your mother tell your father, you are a worthless piece of whatever trash, internally, we have internalized that when a situation is similar, that I am worthless. And so we are going through the life constantly trying to get validation or, you know, really not coming out with our power because we don't believe we're strong enough. So family of origin is a rich, rich, rich space. And when we have unhealed aspects of our family of origin, here's a few results of uncleared family of origin work: people pleasing, caretaking, rescuer, martyr, perfectionist, compulsive performer, and non-commitment. So if you see yourself in any of these aspects, because we all have a version of that, it's often good, it's pointing to the fact that we have some unresolved family of origin work that needs to be taken care of. So that we do, like I said, through intentional breath work or different rites of passage that you could do in a brotherhood journey, through a challenge or whatnot. It's not saying that breath work is the only way of the rites of passage, but in the lineage that I follow, we use breath work as a way to uncover the unknown, the suppressed memories, because in my experience, breath work is the quickest and most impactful way to get into states of non-ordinary reality, which supports us to see aspects. To give you other examples of how to get into states of non-ordinary reality, plant medicine is very popular: ayahuasca, peyote, mushrooms, and so on and so forth. These are medicines that take us into states of non-ordinary reality. So by going into states of non-ordinary reality, we're able to unpack these pieces. So the third rite of passage is shadow work. I'm assuming that most of you have heard of what shadow work is, what shadow is. I don't want to go into that explanation because I could take up the whole time just on speaking of shadow. If any of what I'm saying really interests you, I highly suggest you to check out my Daring World podcast on SoundCloud, because I unpack a lot of these concepts. So I'm here today to give you a few keywords to trigger or open your curiosity. And if you want more, you could either ask the bros that are here. They're going to be going through all of this in the Emergence Brotherhood. I'm confident about that. And if you want a bit more, you could go to my Daring World podcast. So shadow is anything that we have consciously or unconsciously repressed or suppressed about ourselves. It's things that we don't like in the outside world, and therefore we reject it. And shadow could either be like a rejection, so an aversion to a situation, or a attraction, that we would call that a golden shadow. It's like outside world, and therefore we reject it. And shadow could either be like a rejection, so they're going to be going through all of this in the Emergence Brotherhood. I'm confident about that. And if you want a bit more, you could go to my Daring World podcast. So shadow is anything that we have consciously or unconsciously repressed or suppressed about ourselves. It's things that we don't like in the outside world, and therefore we reject it. And shadow could either be like a rejection, so an aversion to a situation, or a attraction, that we would call that a golden shadow. It's like, oh my God, Blake is so smart, he's so attractive, he's so eloquent, he's the man, I wish I could be more like Blake. Even though that is like being inspired by, there's also this shadowy aspect in the belief system that you are not it, and that somehow there is somebody or something outside of you that you need to use as the reference point to get it. And so we will put all this goodness on Blake, and then Blake shows his humanity, and we're like, he completely disappointed me. How could he? It's the large fall from grace. In our culture, we like to build people up only to tear them down. So that is shadowy behavior. And so shadow could also look like, a judgment. It could be, I see Attila, he's outgoing, he's really well expressed, he's joyful, he laughs, and I could be, Attila gets me so annoyed. He's always happy. He's never serious. There's always this storyline with him. He's always got something positive to say. He's so fucking annoying. You know, that could be the aspect that I'm rejecting internally. It's like, what is it about me that feels dissatisfied, that I'm not willing to be in the joy? Or what is it about me that thinks that joy is a bad thing? So we could often find out what our shadow is when we have an energy pointing outwards, a judgment going outwards. What we say is when we're pointing that finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at us. So that's the realm of the shadow. And when we start to own our shadow, so a shadow is known as the shadow because the light hits us from the front and it casts a shadow in the back. And that shadow often is not in our awareness. The people that are aware of our shadows are mostly the people close to us, the beloved. They see it, the brother, the boyfriend, whatnot. It's because they can see what we might not see. So what happens is when we are able to become aware of our shadow, whether it be through a shamanic breathwork process or a strong reflection by a brother. This is what the Brotherhood is about. This is what the Brotherhood community is about. It's about being able to step in and giving difficult shadow reflections so that we can recognize that there's things about ourselves that we can't see, but people that love us can. And if it's given to us in a compassionate way, then we could start taking ownership from it. Because until we know how we're playing out and how our behavior plays out, you know, we're ignorant, and there's nothing wrong with ignorance unless you choose to stay committed to ignorance and not wake up or do like the education process, what these brothers are attempting to do. So when we know about them, we could take ownership from around them. And when we could take ownership around them, we can start loving those unhealed aspects of ourselves. The more we put it as something that is bad about ourselves and we judge it, the more difficult it is to come into wholeness. But as we gain more awareness around our shadow and we start to love the aspect that feels unloved, and that's why we have to behave in those ways, we start to reclaim lost soul aspects of ourselves. We reclaim these parts in order to be more full so that we are less triggered and we are less movable. Like we could be more flexible and malleable, and it really doesn't bother us because I love myself. I get that this is a shadow, I'm working on it, and I'm gonna have compassion and patience for myself. And whatever we're repressing about ourselves ultimately is power that is sitting on the table that we don't have access to. Because I get that this is a shadow, I'm working on it, and I'm gonna have compassion and patience for myself. And whatever we're repressing about ourselves ultimately is power that is sitting on the table that we don't have access to. Because the energy that it takes us to stuff that work and to ignore it and deny it or bypass it takes so much unconscious energy. This energy can be used to be redirected to actually delivering or living the life that we actually want to be living. So as long as we have stuff stuck in the shadow, which we'll have for a lifetime pretty much, but you know, we chip away at it one at a time. As long as we have those aspects playing out, we are leaking incredible amounts of power that we can be using for manifestation. So that's the third rite of passage. The fourth is